All right, people. Well, this tuning thing has been a journey, and sometimes in a journey you have some minor setbacks. So rather than be one of those channels that only shows the good, I'm going to show the this didn't work out so well. Now the results are good, but as far as getting the quality things that I wanted to get out of this video, it didn't quite pan out. So here's what we found. We put it on the Dyno Jet 250i, which is where I had my original tuning done. Not actually, no, not the tuning. I had my original dyno pulls done, and so a couple things went wrong here. The air fuel ratio. There's something that needs to be calibrated on that dyno because even after my custom tune, it still said our air fuel ratio in the middle was like 20, which means it would have been cutting out and stalling, and we would have been doing damage to the motor. And there was no sign of that. The horsepower and torque peak, curves were perfect. So there's something going on with Kent's dyno up at GMD. I don't know if it needs to be calibrated or if the tube he has wasn't long enough to go down far enough in the exhaust. Sometimes if it only goes down like this far in the exhaust, it actually can suck outside air in between the exhaust pulses and stuff like that, and it makes it read lean. So anyway, this is the power we had, and then we went and did my custom tune. And you're like, what happened? Well, a couple things. One, I am not using right now any correction factor. There's none here. This is uncorrected power. So it's not applying environmental variables. I wanted to see what was the motor actually making today versus what it made then. So you are going to get slightly different results. So if it's higher humidity or different temperature, things like that, that can affect that. So you'll notice in some areas here that the blue pipe is, or the blue is the custom, and then the red is blue's custom and red is my tune that I did by my butt dyno. Basically what this is saying when you're looking at uncorrected was you basically, they're a tie. You see, this one's got one more horsepower on this day. Well, if it's 5 or 8 degrees or 10% more humidity on one day, that's what you're going to get with that. Here's what we found, and this was a problem we found with my custom tune. Myself or Charles, don't know which, must have fat-fingered something because the peak power is basically the same up here. They're within a horsepower of each other. And again, even though it's the same dyno, it's on 2 different days. And the environmental differences when you're looking at uncorrected horsepower is going to make that difference. So things are running real well, really nice curves. And then it makes less out here. And we're like, how do we lose all this horsepower? Like, what happened here? And we only noticed it after 7500. The custom tune took a nosedive, and the other one was out here. And we're like, this can't be. We're looking at the tables. We're like, the butterflies on both maps were all forced to stay open. Like, what's going on here? How do we lose 8 horsepower? Not peak, because the peak is roughly the same here, but after 7,500. Now, you may not notice this going on the street because I don't know how many people ride this thing and they actually rev it out to the rev limiter. Most of the time, you're probably shifting somewhere up in here anyway, and so you might not feel that drop. So we're like, what the hell happened here? So I go into the map, and this is something I saw out of the corner of my eye when I flashed it the last time when we were done doing the custom tune. And I was like, that seems like an odd number, but whatever. Didn't think anything more of it. So look at where this drops off. You hit 7,500, they're neck and neck. And then as soon as you start going past that to 7,600, 77, this thing falls off a cliff. That's the custom map. So here's my fuel tables, F1 and F2. What do you notice at wide open throttle out here? I see a huge jump. I don't know if Charles said, hey, add 5%, and I accidentally fat fingered it and put 35% or something. This number is way too much. I mean, going from 14.8, let's just say that's 15 to 21.6, that's like a 34% increase in fuel. At 7,500, the motor was pulling fine. And then after 7,500, it went ball and started bogging. And so I'm like, wait a minute. The flies are open. We go into the map. I looked at both maps, the map that I had on that day and then the map we have today. And I'm looking at my timing is all the same. I'm looking at my, ETV3, 100% all the way up to 8,000. So the flies aren't shutting. What could it be? And so exactly where the power starts to come down early, I noticed we're going from 15, 14.8, and it's normal for it to fluctuate up a little down. One might be a little higher than, see here, it's 14.9 here, the next one's 14.5. There's always some variations between different RPM ranges. For whatever reason, the motor was happier. I made a mistake here. I made a typo. Somehow I increased this last piece way too much. There's no way that this is going to require 34% more fuel. 3%, there's slight variances as you go up through the revs here, but you look from one cell to the other, it's a couple hundred, not 6,000, almost 7,000. That was me. Sorry about that, folks, if you're using this map. You may not have ever noticed it. You're not going to hurt anything. It's rich. It's not like it's lean and you're going to blow something up or get detonation. At least it's in the other direction, but it's way too rich. And so what this does is if you look over here, it goes from 7,500 to 8,000. There's no 70, it doesn't go by each one at RPM, 7,501, 7,502. You could never fuel it that way. It would take months to do all that. So what it does is it takes these steps, and then whatever the values are, what's called interpolation, it'll basically start averaging and moving towards that. So it knows at 7,500, you're at 14,896, whatever that means to the ECU. And then by the time it gets to 8,000, it has to go to 21,659. So what it's doing is each step is the RPM's climb. It's going an increment of this difference. So it's averaging and smoothing. So it doesn't just go from this and then bang to that. It goes between that 7,500 to 8,000. It's adding more fuel like that. Instead of going over and then up to it, it draws a line between the two. And then every step in between, it gets this incremental increase. And that's why at 7,500, 76, it starts dipping, 77. And the more it goes, it's more. And it's just way too rich. Down here, it was probably like 9.8 or 10 or something crazy. And that's why that power dropped. That's why that torque dropped exactly there, right where I made a typo. So what I did was I went back in, I removed, I think 25% here or 28%, got this down to like 15.2 or something. So it was still an increase, but just a little bit. And then this I got down to like 14.4 or something like that. So it was like minus 26% here, I think. And then like minus, I think like 21% or something. So I got these numbers smoothed out. The problem was, by the time we figured this out, my dyno time was done. Ken had some other stuff to do. I wasn't able to do it there on my phone because trying to click on the cells on a phone screen, you can push maps and do things from your phone, but these cells are too small for you to try to hit with your finger and highlight and work with. I didn't have my tablet with me, so I had to wait till I got home, got my Bluetooth connector and stuff. I have since updated my map, and I will, if you have my map and you've got the link to the custom maps folder, I will go ahead and update those maps shortly here. So that they all have that new thing, the new values in there. But that's why we saw that dip there. It's not that the map was wrong from that one cell. Everywhere else, it's making good power. The nominal differences you're seeing here is just because it's one day to another. You're seeing very slight differences. You went from 93.5 to 94.5. You went from 82.7 to 83.7. You're talking a horsepower. And even on the same bike, even with the same map, you go from one day to the next and the humidity changes 10, 15%, it's 10 degrees warmer or colder, you're going to get those variances. That's why you typically use corrected horsepower to check for that. But it'll normalize it. But we noticed a difference here, and I didn't want environmental variables to exacerbate it or make it worse or less than it was. That's why I'm running this in uncorrected raw numbers. There's no correction factor, so it's not adding or anything to these numbers. Here's what it made on the dyno on that day. That's what it put out. 102, And here it was just slightly less, 101.39. I'm happy with that result. I was hoping for high 90s. So anything over 100, gravy. Same thing here with torque. Anything over 80, I was considering gravy. Knowing what the bike does stock, which is about 79 and a half foot-pounds stock with a stock pipe and 93-ish horsepower. So at the very least, we picked up 8 horsepower. Out here, now that I got that fixed, I would expect this blue, which it started to pick up here, will be running neck and neck with this and maybe even just slightly above it. So that 102, 103, which is what I was hoping to see today, will be there now that I fixed that crazy rich spot. Just is what it is. And that's the problem. It's 2 hours each way to the dyno, and I didn't have my tablet with me, so I was kind of bummed. I was like, oh, do I even put this in a video? Because people are going to be, bummed that we're not getting the numbers that we wanted. We are. We got great. I mean, when you look at this torque curve, it's a freaking tabletop. I mean, that is an awesome torque curve. Same thing with the horsepower. It's just that I fat fingered my tablet, and I screwed that up. So I think what I did here, let's see. Well, you know what? I can go and download the other map that I changed it to. So if I go to Drive, and we go to Tune ECU and Maps and Custom Dyno Maps, and we're going to take this one. Oops. All right. Doot. And we're going to, is that the newest one? No, the one I have is on my tablet only. So that's not going to be there yet. I have to push it from the tablet, but I'll show you what we did to fix it. I went over here to the F tables, went to modify, and here I want to say I took out like 25%. And here, let's just go down 20%. And then let's go ahead and commit those, apply those. And you'll see how this number dropped. So I basically went down to something like that. So now it's still more there because I don't mind it being a little rich at wide open, but it was so much more rich than it needed to be that it was starting to bog down. And I think I actually took another couple percent out of this. So I want to say on the map I just pushed, oops, not that one. Let's go over here, modify, and just take out another 2%. See if that gets to the number I remember seeing. And let's go ahead and apply. Yeah, it was something like that. So it was 22% here, and I think we did 25 and another 2, so it was 27% we pulled out. So it added a little bit more. Let's look at the F2, same thing. It's a little bit more rich, but it's not insanely more rich. So that was how we basically normalized that. And in fact, I might have even taken a little bit more out of this. So it might have been 30% I pulled here and 22 here. I'll get you the final numbers. But anyway, moving on. That overly rich condition is what caused it to go power, starts choking it out with fuel a little bit. We fixed that. That number will absolutely, if I'd had this and we'd fixed it there on the dyno and then rerun it, this number would be right up here neck and neck. So we didn't get a lot of power gains from smoothing it out, but the bike is running stronger and it's wheeling more. And so, I don't know what to say. It's definitely happier with the custom tune. Now, something else we want to do, and here's another thing that, let's see, we've got, let's just get rid of all these. So I wanted to run it in the different modes. So what we have here is, the bikes are making it wide open throttle. The bikes are making similar power, but then you'll see rain start to fall off. Once you start to get up here, the rain mode is really, really restricted. And so you see those throttle plates shutting down, as you would expect. If we go in here to the ETV tables, get past the ignition, rain mode was giving us 90.7 and at wide open throttle, and then it started cutting back. And so you see that reflected here. You see that it was making comparable power and then starts pulling power. Then you go to the green line and you'll see out here The green line, which if we look at our ETV tables, was 90.7 all the way up. So the difference between that and rain at wide open throttle is that at 4,400, 4,500 RPMs, right in that range, it starts pulling back a bit, whereas ETV2 continues with that basically 91% throttle plate opening all the way. And you'll see that having those plates open a little bit more is why it makes more power. That's why the green line continued pulling while the red line, which is the rain mode, started pulling down and going away. What you'll also see is, now let's go in and zoom this in. Let's get rid of rain. Is you'll see that green is road mode, and you'll see that sport is 100%, is blue. And so what you can see is there's a couple more horsepower up here, and there's a bit more torque simply from having those throttle plates open. So if we go back to our ETV tables, 91%, 90.7 all the way up, 100. So those throttle plates being open slightly more has extended the power longer here and given us a little bit of a horsepower gap here. We're looking at a 2.5-ish, almost 3 horsepower difference. Now, here's the other thing. This should be more if we didn't have this overly rich condition here. I would expect both of them to move up a little bit, but because they were both just bogging down, they kind of merged back into each other over here. But that's the difference between holding the throttle plates open. So when you think about the stock bike, on the stock bike with the stock map, you had a similar situation out here where it was 90.7 at 100% throttle, and then it started pulling back into the low 80s. And so people said, well, extending the 90.7, holding it open an extra 9%, or up here it was like in the 84, 85% range. Does that really make a difference in top end power? Yeah, it does. And had we not had today's unfortunate snafu of the fuel being too rich up there due to a typo, you would have seen that even more. But that's a 3 horsepower difference, even with that condition, just from having the throttle plates open that extra 9%. And I would expect there's another 2 or 3 horsepower out there if we were to rerun it now that I've remapped it. So those ride modes do make a difference. This was at wide open throttle. If we were doing partial throttle openings, that's where you'd see even more of a difference, because if I'm in ETV3 and I'm at like 61% throttle, I'm getting 61% of the throttle plates open all the way up. So it's going to give me that. If I'm in road mode, it drops at 10% down to 52. If I'm in rain mode, it drops at another 10% down to 44. This is why rain feels slow and lethargic and just you could tell it's struggling. It's held back. You twist it all the way, but you could tell the bike is really restrained. Road is a bit more. And then when you go to this snappy 1-to-1 ratio here, that's why this feels so much better. You're not just getting more action here, because whatever you twist it to, it actually delivers instead of only delivering a portion. But out here, it's given all she's got. It's 100% open throttle versus, almost 91%. And that is making a difference out here. That's adding a few horsepower. The ignition's the same for all the modes. The modes are independent. It doesn't change the spark, doesn't change ignition, doesn't change the fueling. All that changes is how much are you opening those plates. And there is a horsepower difference there. It's 3%. It's 3 horsepower right there. You're also picking up a foot-pound and a half of torque. And again, if that wasn't rich, I'm kicking myself here, but for me to go back and retest this now, I have to go drive 2 hours in the cold each way and pay another $80 just to come back and say, well, this is where the line ended up, and see there's a little bit more. This is as good as I'm going to get for now. If I'm up there for some other reason at some point on that bike, I'll stop in and see if he can do this again. But this is what's going on. So I need to go strangle my goddamn dog, because that one pity, Max, is just down there whimpering and whining in his crate. He's been out 3 times, and he's about to get the shit shocked out of him with his shock collar, because he will not shut the fuck up. So anyway, rather than stopping my video to go smack the shit out of him, I'm just trying to muddle through it, but goddamn is that distracting. So there we have it. The sport mode picked up a little bit of power out here over road mode, and it held a little bit power a little bit longer and made a difference up top, and it would have been more had I not been a bit of a goon and fat fingered my keyboard when I was putting in my variables up here, and had I not had those things just stinking awful rich. So anyway, if I go back and open it just to see what those changes were again. Yeah, I mean, look at how much that jumped up. You see how much extra fuel there is, and you're like, yeah, I see your problem. I see why it fell off a cliff exactly in that spot. So we got that all fixed, all sorted, so we good now. Anyway, hope this guy's taught you something. I know I was hoping to have a little bit better results out here and stuff. It's just, you know what? Like I said, this is the journey. Sometimes you stumble a little bit. Sometimes you make a mistake. And not having my tablet with me out there, I didn't think to bring it. I should have. I could have just fixed it right there and said, give me 20 minutes, go get lunch, and come back and rerun it. But hey, live and learn, folks. This is what it is. So anyway, we'll talk to you folks later. If you got any questions, throw them in the comment section.